All right. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Eric Nolan. I am running for Flagstaff City Council, and I am going to do a short town hall where I'm going to be focusing on sustainability, and in particular, tying sustainability to Flagstaff. I've been making this a huge part of my campaign because a lot of things that we have in the works here in Flagstaff are definitely related to how do we run a sustainable economy? How do we have sustainable operations, especially in the face of climate change and the like? So what I wanted to do today was bring on a guest who I've been very excited about his work since I met him in the world of sustainability, because he's not somebody that talks about what can be done. He's somebody out there doing things on the ground to make it happen. So I want to bring in Josh Prigge. He is the CEO of Sustridge Sustainability Consulting and host of the Sustainable Nation podcast. And you can find him on his website at sustridge.com. And here you can find all the episodes to his podcast as well, learn a little bit about his company. So Josh, I just want to welcome you and want to say hi.
Thanks, Eric. Looking forward to the discussion, and looking forward to your race and all the great things that you're going to do for Flagstaff. I'm super excited that you're running for this position. We need more people like you getting into these positions.
Thank you. And you know, when you talk about positions, I understand that I'm entering at a government level. So I'm trying to look at how does government handle sustainability. But you actually come up from the, I guess you would say, the private sector, because you're out there in the field and you're doing consulting jobs. So do you want to talk a little bit more about your work?
Sure. Yeah, I run a sustainability consulting business, as you said. I work with, well, it kind of all started when I was leading sustainability for a university out in Hawaii. It's kind of where my sustainability career started. Got a lot of great experience building a new sustainability program for a large organization from scratch. Then I went into the corporate world, got hired by a large wine company in Northern California as their director of sustainability. They're a company that really has been recognized as a leader in sustainability in that industry for a long time. Name is Fetzer Von Terra. And so about 3 years ago, I left Fetzer and started my own sustainability consulting firm. And now I work with all sorts of businesses, mostly some municipalities, but mostly corporate sustainability, working with any businesses from small startups to a number of Fortune 500 companies on different things, like anything sustainability related, whether it's helping them develop their sustainability program and sustainability strategy, or specific initiatives that they need help with, like conducting a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, or doing a zero waste analysis, or producing a sustainability report, and really everything in between. So been doing that for about 3 years now in all sorts of different industries, and been having a lot of fun doing it.
I bet. If you had maybe one or two that you could highlight where you feel like this really gets at the reason why you got into this profession.
Well, I originally got into sustainability because I knew, I wanted to dedicate my career to making some sort of positive impact. I became much more aware of the environmental issues that we're facing around the world, became much more aware of climate change and the importance of changing the way we do business and the way we operate as a society. So my undergraduate was physical education. So I was like a teacher and a coach back in Minnesota, where I'm from, and then went to grad school to study sustainability. So something completely different, and been doing it ever since. But really what I've found since I've been, launched into the corporate world and working with all these businesses is that there's been a huge change over the past 10 years or so in the way the private sector has seen sustainability and has embraced sustainability. Previously, sustainability was really more of an add-on, like something that they were doing in addition to their core business, because they felt like it's the right thing to do, because they're worried about bad PR and those types of things. Now, what we've been seeing over the past several years are that businesses are understanding that sustainability really drives business value. It's not just doing it because it's the right thing to do, or we're worried about regulations or PR, but businesses are doing it because of the workforce. More younger and younger people want to work for companies that are doing the right thing and share their values and their beliefs. They're doing it for customers because more customers want to support those companies that share their values and beliefs as well. They're doing it to reduce their operating costs. When you're reducing energy, waste, greenhouse gas emissions, water use, all of that saves money and reduces your bottom line. They're doing it to drive innovation. When you're using sustainability as a lens to look at your business and identify new ways to be efficient, or new products, or new practices, new management processes, sustainability can really help innovate and drive business model innovation, really. They're doing it to mitigate risk, as I mentioned, regulatory risk, reputational risk. And now we're seeing investors, large investors and asset managers who are investing in these large companies and portfolios of different companies. They're now asking companies, what are you doing regarding sustainability? How are you mitigating and managing your climate change risks? And so there's been a huge, just amazing things have happened just over the past 5 years, where now, corporations, companies, large and small, are understanding that sustainability is not just the right thing to do, and it's not just needed to reverse the environmental crises and declining ecosystems around the world, but it's needed to drive business values, and it's needed to create a competitive advantage in their industries. So it's been really exciting to witness that.
Yeah, and that I see that a lot here in Flagstaff too, because my whole idea about bringing zero waste to Flagstaff, it's that it's an actual industry that's emerging in other places. And one of the things that I found really important that I want to tag back to are your podcasts. So you're host of the Sustainable Nation podcast, and I would definitely recommend anybody out there, go check out some of those episodes, because there's a lot of really great information from people who are in the profession, working with other companies. You can see an entire industry emerging. It's beautiful, in my opinion, for lack of a better word. But some things that I was hoping you might be able to talk to a little bit are some of these interviews that you're doing, because your interview with Aaron Simon, for example, the head of plastic waste and business at World Wildlife Fund, that was a fascinating discussion about plastics. And I thought it was very indicative of the direction that we need to go so we can solve our plastic pollution problem. Because, one thing I think we can all be on the same page about, doesn't matter what waterway you're going into, doesn't even matter where you hike, anywhere that human beings have been, you're going to find plastic out in those environments. So how do we make sure that we're capturing all of that? William McDonough calls them technical nutrients, to put it back into the system for that circular economy model. And William McDonough was another guest that you have, and Gary Liss, who talks about zero waste. So you have a lot of really great information on there. And I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit to what have you learned through all of these interviews that you've been doing on your podcast?
Yeah, you named some great people who are really doing some amazing things, and you talked about World Wildlife Fund and what they're doing, working with large corporations. So World Wildlife Fund is one. Environmental Defense Fund is another big nonprofit that I've had on. And what I've been learning from talking with some of those large nonprofits, as well as some of these large corporations, is that that collaboration between NGO and private business is so critical to address some of these huge issues like the plastic issue. McDonald's, they worked with the Environmental Defense Fund for a number of years, and Bob Langert, who was one of my guests, wrote a book about it, about the importance of working with nonprofits. So when we can get like collaborative efforts between government, business, and NGOs, that's really, I think, how we drive change, like long-term systemic change. We're seeing, Walmart is one really good example of they worked with the Environmental Defense Fund to create what's called Project Gigaton. And this is a program that Walmart has to eliminate a gigaton of greenhouse gas emissions in their supply chain. So not just their operations, that's a separate goal that they have to reduce their own energy and their own waste and those things. But they want to work with their suppliers and people who sell products in their stores to reduce their impact. And they set that goal of a gigaton of greenhouse gas emissions. And that creates a ripple effect throughout business. When you have the largest retailer in the world that are setting these bold, ambitious goals and are making these long-term commitments, I've had more than one company reach out to me because they needed help developing their sustainability program, specifically because of Project Gigaton, because they sell to Walmart and they want to be in compliance or they want to do what Walmart is asking them to do, to establish a sustainability program, set targets to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, move away from virgin plastic and all these different things. So and that all came out of a collaboration between EFD, EDF, and Walmart, and there's a lot of examples of that. But I think that collaboration is so critical. And then when you talk about like the city of Flagstaff, how can the city of Flagstaff work with businesses or nonprofits or both to establish your goals and make long-term systemic change in your city? I think that's one of the key things that I've learned through, I think, over 130 interviews now with people leading sustainability in business, government, higher education, and nonprofits, is that we need to work together. We can't. Sometimes there's a perception that corporations see these environmental nonprofits as the enemy. They're looking down at the big bad corporation and that's doing bad things, but they need to work together. And we're seeing a lot of great examples of that, and can really, really drive some long-term change.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been needing to really look at, practically on a local level, especially within government. What are certain things that we can do? Because here are things that government handles. We handle solid waste. So that's one area that, and actually we have a volunteer, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the chart here. This is a chart that I've shown before of our current waste stream. What you see, each column is by year. So we go back to 2014 all the way up to 2018. And then along the vertical axis, that's how many tons of waste. The blue parts that you see in each of the column represents the full waste that went to a landfill that year. And then that little green trim that you see up at the top is how much of our total waste has been recycled and gone through a recycling process. And as you can see, we don't really have a waste plan in place, at least nothing even close for zero waste. And one of the things that I found rather inspiring is when I went to the city of Palo Alto, California's Zero Waste Plan 2018. And this year, before COVID hit, they were in the process of actually implementing it. And what you can see throughout that plan is they get down to the detail of, from a government level, what kind of bins do we need to provide to make sure that at the point of the end user, so when that consumer says, I have this bottle and I'm going to throw it in this direction, where can we guide that bottle from there to make sure that it catches up with all the other like plastics, so we can make sure that we recycle that correctly. So in the process of that, I can see that we have a whole ton of jobs that we're going to need to create in order to get that kind of infrastructure into place. So in a lot of ways, I think that could be a good thing, because our landfill here in Arizona is right next to, one of our landmark sites, which is Sunset Crater. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware that an entire landfill is right adjacent to that. So to me, I'm thinking, okay, what do we got to do to avoid that process? Because that is, to me, it's the epitome of what we're not prioritizing and thinking about in the way that we run our economies. And that's where we're kind of getting past the point at being able to use this landfill model because it's just out in the environment too much, collecting in the oceans and waterways too much, and now we got to do something about it. So in a lot of ways, that's what I see a local government being able to address. We have water conservation measures, but you're right, and I think you're right on point with that. You know, how do we, and Jeff, if you want to bring the screen back, thank you. How do we, like you're saying, how do you build that sort of consensus between the private sector, government, and then honestly, where I think there's even probably more work to be done, and it's in that nonprofit world. The nonprofit sector really is sort of that middle glue that can keep the private and public sectors pretty much balancing out with one another, because it's specifically targeted for work that maybe government is stretched too thin, that it can't actually get around to doing the work. And that's where I'm going to see what I can do to see if we have those resources, because the work just isn't getting done. I don't necessarily care if it's by government or not, but it's not getting done. And that's when I usually see, well, then if government doesn't do it, then who does it? But what your model suggests in the consulting world of sustainability, and again, I'm always jazzed about your work when I learn about everything you get involved with, because it looks at how do you fill those gaps. And to me, there's all kinds of work out there. So do you see that, like now that the corporate world is catching on to, okay, this isn't like a theoretical idea, this is an investment. So how do you kind of see it from there, from that investment lens?
An investment as far as companies investing in sustainability?
Right. Carbon neutrality. How do we really close this loop on a circular economy?
Right. Yeah, that kind of goes back to my first point about their understanding that sustainability drives business value, and the ROI for sustainability is great. Not always completely tangible as far as dollars and cents. But the research out there continues to grow. When we talk about companies that have a demonstrated commitment to sustainability, they're outperforming their peers. They're reducing their operating costs. Their employees are more engaged. There's a study that comes out by the National Environmental Education Foundation. They're kind of the leading researcher on employee engagement and sustainability, and they found that those sustainability that these projects, waste, energy, water, they'll have a good payback on reduced operating costs. But now it's all these other things like employees driving innovation. There was a huge study that was done by Deloitte. They looked at over, I think, 190 different peer-reviewed studies on sustainability and the impacts of sustainability on innovation. And they categorized a whole bunch of companies that were recognized as sustainability leaders through a number of criteria, as well as categorized companies that were seen as innovation leaders. And a company that was a sustainability leader was 400 times more likely to also be recognized as an innovation leader. There's just that direct link between those that are driving sustainability and those that are driving innovation in their business. So when you talk about investment, I think we're seeing massive investment from all sorts of companies. We're seeing ambitious goals. We now have what are called science-based targets, where companies are setting their greenhouse gas emission reduction targets to be aligned with what the science says is needed for us to limit global temperatures to 2 degrees. So companies are aligning their goals and their targets with what is needed to achieve the Paris Climate Accord. Also, they're now aligning their goals with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are a number of different goals that the United Nations has set forth as what is really needed to achieve a sustainable society in the future. So there's a lot of great frameworks out there that businesses are following now. They're investing heavily in these goals, as well as the resources like the employees and staff. I'm pretty sure every Fortune 500 company now has a sustainability employee or a sustainability department. And when you think about, 10 years ago, when people were a lot of times would ask what sustainability means, the change has just been so rapid. When I think about where we were at 10 years ago, and now that within the past 12 to 24 months, the incredible increase that we've seen in ESG investing. ESG is environmental social governance, basically sustainability, something that investors use to kind of assess a company's commitment or performance around sustainability. We're seeing a huge increase in ESG investing from the largest investors in the world. And BlackRock, actually, who's the largest asset manager in the world, they manage, I think, $6.4 trillion of assets around the world. Their CEO, Larry Fink, puts out an annual letter to shareholders every year. In the past 2 years, he specifically stated that climate change and sustainability factors are going to be key, and that he predicted within 5 years, every investor will be using ESG factors in their assessment of companies when they invest, because it is that important, and the research is continuing to grow that shows that these companies that are sustainable are outperforming their peers.
You know, and to make this relevant to Flagstaff too, and this is something that everybody should have on their radar, we just had another record-breaking summer. We had heats for higher temperatures over a longer period, and what that means for Flagstaff is we're going to have less snowpack, and this year we didn't get a lot in terms of monsoons. And what I don't think a lot of people, well, hopefully a lot of people realize, we get the majority of our water from groundwater. So we get a little bit of surface water, but because of the way we're positioned, we don't have like a big river like the Colorado River that can come through, and we can just, you know, divert some of that water the way that Phoenix and Southern California uses those resources. So for us, our groundwater is it. You know, there's been some proposals put forward that Red Gap Ranch, which is, I believe, 40 miles east of here, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. The water I hear can be very brackish, and we're looking at continuing to grow our population and using that as like a backup water source. So it's going to take more resources to process that water and transport it, not to mention the maintenance that's involved. So to me, it's a very significant investment from taxpayers. I mean, that will cost taxpayers. And how are we going to look at that? Or what I'm glad people are now coming back around to discussing, well, what about reclaimed water? Is there more that we can do there? Can we put in different systems that can get a tertiary or a quaternary process where we're flashing UV light and we're using all these different filtration systems, so that way we can get that water as pure as I think one could, because they do it like parts per million as far as the extra stuff, particulates. But, you know, how do we get these systems in place? Because here's what I see when I talk to people. People are worried about their homes. People are worried about their kids and the futures of their kids. And people want to make sure that they live in a community that's doing the right thing. And it's interesting because a few years ago, I participated in interviewing business owners and general managers of different stores in our downtown area because we were looking at banning the plastic bag. And at this point, I just see plastic bags everywhere that it's like, until we get a system in place, it's best we not use those. Out of 35 owners and general managers, I think it was like 80%, said they know it's going to cost more, but it's the right thing to do. So it tells me that, yeah, the business world, they're not opposed to doing these things. What gave them an out is that the state thought that that would somehow interfere with the economy, and they stripped local municipalities from being able to implement a ban on plastic bags. They just got it right in on another piece of legislation and then passed it. So it's like, okay, even if we wanted to do the right thing, even if our business community supported that, we can't cast a wider net to make sure that this practice can get under wraps until we can get something in place to make sure that if we want to utilize something like a plastic bag, it's not going to wind up in the environment or in a landfill. So that's how I'm always thinking systemically. How is it that we can transition things on that level of things? So, you know, one of the things that I've also been discussing recently with a developer of an entire neighborhood that's looking at being installed, Are there satellite systems put in place in these neighborhoods so we can better collect resources and keep them separated? So that way, by the time we get down to the point of a landfill, we're diverting that and instead sending that glass or paper or plastic down that cycle that it should go to, so we can reuse those resources. So to me, from a government standpoint, that's where I'm looking at. We're not seeing any slowing down in our housing market. We're actually, and this is something that's a tough conversation to have with citizens of Flagstaff, but it is what it is, and it's the truth. We're growing. Nothing is going to really stop growth right now, because we have a citizens initiative, Proposition 207, that passed, that basically said property owners are entitled to the full value of their housing. So because of that, we're seeing all this high density growth and things kind of popping up all over the place. And I'm thinking, okay, but we're still increasing our waste. It still increases overall usage of electricity and water and everything else. So how do we make sure that these systems are in place before we hit any kind of a next level point of growth? Because now we're just exponentially adding to the problem if our plans are not more solidly implemented in our city code. So I know I'm kind of getting lost in a little bit of the jargon, but on a local government level, those are the tools that I have. And that's where I would ask somebody like you or a private business, what would you need from government that would make your job easier? What can government do to facilitate that? Or is that something that, like in the case of consulting, just let the private market figure out those jobs?
Yeah, I think it has to go hand in hand. I think working together is the way to do it, and bringing those different sectors together for the good of your community. Right, businesses are operating in that community. Nonprofits are focused on making that community better. Government wants people to live in that community and be healthy and be safe. So you all have those common interests, and so it has to be a collaborative effort between those sectors. Whether that is government giving support to businesses for these new initiatives. I was working with the city of Carlsbad on a pilot project to get restaurants throughout the city, Carlsbad, California, to get restaurants throughout that city to eliminate single-use plastic disposables. And so instead of the city just putting a new policy in place and mandating that all the restaurants, remove all of these items or they'll be fined, they rolled out a program to help train these businesses on how they can find replacement materials. They provided funding for the businesses to purchase supplies to get them started. They helped the businesses find vendors that they can have long-term contracts with, and did face-to-face training for their employees on reducing waste. And so I think there's ways where you can work together, and when you bring the nonprofit world towards that as well, they have additional resources that they can contribute to make that even more effective. So again, I think it all comes back to collaboration, finding that common goal, finding those common interests, and then working together towards them.
Yeah, and that's something I've definitely focused, not just in my campaign, but in my life. And that's something that, having the ability to connect people, to build strong networks, to me has always been a part of community building, because I agree. I don't look at anybody as opposition. Like, the whole point of sustainability is that it's such a big thing that we're all included, whether you want to be or not. So it's in our benefit to at least pay attention, maybe learn some things, participate in whatever way that you can, so we can transition to a better mode of operation. So it does look like we have a question. Jeff, do you want to go ahead and bring that up? Okay, sorry, Jeff, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So we have a question here from Kelly. How can municipalities incentivize businesses to utilize more sustainable products, such as bags, without full bans that are inevitably blocked by the state legislation?
Yeah, I think that goes, the example I just gave of government working with businesses to make those changes by allocating some resources to help train them, to help them find alternative products that they can use, to help them train their customers on why they're doing it, educate their customers. It was just one example of a project that I worked on that I think tried to bridge that gap between full on just creating a policy and demanding things from businesses to actually meeting them in the middle and helping them through the process.
Yeah, and I would say tax credits is another thing that we can do. I know our sustainability program that just was elevated to a sustainability section, where I think they're going to be taking on more responsibility of how does sustainability work throughout all departments of local government. So I'm really excited to see what they do. But part of that is something that, they've been clued in on this the whole time, because in our city codes, in our city codes, which is basically where our law on a local level exists, they have incentives built in there that, if you can dedicate so much energy towards this standard, then we might give you a density bonus or a parking space bonus or something to negotiate that. What we're trying to do is build a more sustainable model, and these buildings, because of the state power that gets involved in this, prevents us from stopping any growth. So what we're trying to do is negotiate, like, okay, can you at least build this sustainably, because it's going to be here for a while. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to bridge those gaps. And like you were saying, the key word for me has always been collaborating. To me, this is a full team effort. And Josh, I really appreciate your time and coming on today. I don't see any other questions, so we can probably go ahead and wrap it up. But if anybody would like to leave a comment or question, I can forward it to Josh, or I can answer it myself. And Josh, I really wish you well on your future endeavors. And again, you can catch Josh on sustridge.com. That is his website, his sustainability consulting website. And he also has a podcast called the Sustainable Nation Podcast. So, Josh, would you like to wrap up with anything?
Vote for Eric Nolan. Good luck in your race, and keep up the great work.
All right, brother. Well, I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care, everybody.